It all started one fall evening. That night the air was clear and crisp, cool autumn wind blowing through the trees, the moon out in full and as red as ruby. It was a night where my whole life changed. My dad had been missing for a few weeks, which, given his job, was not all that odd, but we hadn't heard from him. But what was odder still was when we tried to contact the abbot. He said my dad was fine, but he couldn't tell us where he was. It was at this point I decided to go see if the old man had left any clues in his office. I searched every nook and cranny, but nothing found among the many volumes of supernatural beings and cryptids. Finally, my wits' end, I decided to try his computer. Password locked. Great, just my luck. I looked around his desk. There wasn't much on it, but an old photo of me, my mom, and him. Then I stopped to think for a moment. No way he's that simple. I decided to try my mom's birthday. Wrong password flashed over the screen. Okay, wrong first guess, I thought. Let's try mine. I entered my birthday, and then everything seemed to shut off. Then I could hear the door lock on its own, and shutters drop down over the windows, and the computer sprang back to life, my dad's face appearing on it. I heard his voice. If you're seeing this, one of three things has happened. 1. I've been gone long enough for you to go looking for answers. 2. I'm dead. Or 3. I'm incorporeal, and therefore I am unable to find my way back. In any of these cases, there's one person that should be able to help. At this moment, a hidden compartment in the desk opened to reveal a very old file. On top of the desk, there was a file. It had big red, bold letters written on it, reading, Sir Vincent Von Holt. I opened the file and looked inside. One thing stuck out immediately. There, embroidered on one piece of paper, was written, Undead and extremely dangerous. Do not engage at any cost. What was my dad thinking? He was going to send me out to go find a vampire? It was at this point the lights came back on. Then the bookcase turned around, revealing my dad's extra hunting equipment. I sighed. Well, at least I won't have to go in with nothing. So, with my many years of reading my dad's notes and the books he had received from the Vatican, I knew what I would need to keep a vampire at bay and give myself a good chance at running away if I needed to. I looked through the file more. And it did seem to have his last known whereabouts. It was an old run-down house. I made note of the house on my map, and I headed out to find my answers. After stealing the family van, I showed up at the old house. The house seemed so dark, and there were cobwebs everywhere. The odd thing is, nothing was broken. Not anywhere. No glass windows broken. It was like new. The house was just collecting dust and cobwebs. Even though it had sat empty for years, and I knew people had vandalized the place before, we would always hear stories about the house in school. I took a deep breath and walked up the porch. And a single squeak. I walked up to the front door, and as I reached out for the knob turned and the door swung inward. I peered inside the entryway. It seemed dimly lit. It seemed odd that light could be coming from inside, as you could not see any from the windows. I stepped inside and started to look around. The first room I came to looked like an old sitting room. Large fireplace on one side of the room. I walked over to it. The fireplace was still warm. I thought on this for a moment. Someone is here, but wherever could they be? Then I heard behind me a voice so chilling my blood ran cold as ice. Why, hello there, young Master Cross. spun on my heels to find myself face to face with a man, his skin pale blue-gray, his eyes a piercing blue. They seemed to look right into the depths of my soul. I started to speak, but was so struck with fear I stuttered and stammered, Who are you? At that point, I was interrupted, and he spoke. Who am I? You walk into my house and snoop around and then ask who I am? He paused for a moment. I was petrified with fear, and I felt so cold my limbs were frozen in place. Then he spoke once more. I'm the one you're looking for. I told your father not to go, for if he did, it would cost him something. Wait was all I was able to force out of my lips. He turned and looked at me. Yes? Does that mean my father is dead? He looked at me and smiled and replied, No, your father's fine. Why don't you have a seat, and we will have a small chat. He motioned for a large, cozy, tall back chair. Almost without thinking, I moved to the seat. He then sat down in the chair opposite of me. He snapped his fingers, and the fire roared to life, filling the room with light. The fear and chill that filled me had melted away. He motioned to a small antique-looking teacup with a matching saucer sitting on the table next to me. Please, have a drink. It's only polite to offer a guest a drink. I picked up the teacup. It was empty. I looked at it, and then at him, with a very confused look on my face. Just think of your favorite drink, is all he said. I thought about it for a moment, looking at the cup, and then it filled with a golden yellow liquid. The liquid, it appeared, smelled very much of apples. I looked at him, wondering. He seemed to be waiting in anticipation. So I asked, Is it poisoned? He laughed, but replied, No. It's actually the one thing that cup can't make. In order still, it knows what can kill a being, and what can't. I looked at him quite puzzled, and then said, Okay then? I took a moment to pause before asking, Then what are you so wound up for? He smiled and said, Wondering what's in the cup. It's always a mystery. I relaxed and decided to take a drink. It was apple juice. I was puzzled for a moment. Then I was hit by flashes of my younger days as a carefree kid. It only lasted a few seconds before I freaked out and sent the cup and saucer crashing to the floor. As I screamed out, What the hell was that? Tis, you shouldn't swear, young Master Cross, he said and laughed lightly. After this, I calmed myself a little and then asked, What was that? He stood up and walked over and picked up the teacup and saucer. I was puzzled even more now. I know those broke. I watched them shatter. What was in the cup, young Master Cross? He asked. I stared at the intact teacup and saucer in his hand, and then replied, Apple juice. He set the cup down and laughed. Ah, I see. So flashes on happier days as a carefree child. I looked at him shocked and amazed. How was all I was able to get out? Before I could finish the question, he interrupted me, stating, The cup will give you whatever drink you most desire. Then, it flashes pleasant memories that are tied to that drink. I sat back down and looked at the cup, then asked, Didn't I break that cup? He smiled and replied, Yes, you did. But the cup can reform itself. He paused for a few moments and then said, But please, don't break it just because you can. She doesn't like that. I stared at him, wide-eyed, and asked, She? He looked back at me with a very serious look on his face as he returned to his chair. There's enough magic in that cup that it has grown life. It happens sometimes. I have a few such things stuck in my life, that cup being one of them. I started to ask more about my father, but before the words could leave my mouth, he answered me. Your father is being held by a demon lord. He said it so casually, so calmly, as if it was nothing. I froze up again, panicking, thoughts racing in my mind. I've seen and read all the books my dad had, and there was no way I could handle that. If I'm correct, even a vampire couldn't really handle this. As I thought this, he looked at me and smiled, then spoke. Stop panicking. I'm going to help you get your dad. And by the way, the file's wrong. I'm not a vampire. He paused for a moment. Then, without moving his lips, I heard his voice in my mind. I'm much more than that. Then I asked out loud, You can speak telepathically? I hear him yell in my head. Yes, I can. Paused and then went on in a more normal tone. I can do a great many things to the mind. But that's a story for another time. He paused for a moment. Then I heard his voice once more in my head. So I must ask, are you expecting me to save your dear old dad? Or would you like to come with me? I looked at him in shock and amazement. Then I asked, wait, if I go with you, how likely am I to die? He laughed at that, and then replied, Oh, more than likely you'll die a few times, but I have an answer for death. If you're so worried about it, that is. I gulped and got very nervous. An answer for not dying? I don't like the sound of that. He's going to bite me and turn me into a vampire, isn't he? It was at this moment I heard his voice catch me. As I thought I told you, I am not a vampire. He took a moment, paused. But that might not be a bad idea. All the alarms in my head were going off, and I started to panic. He got up from his chair and walked over to me. He placed his hand on my shoulder, and then he said, This may pinch a little. Then I felt a small sting on the back of my neck. Walked back over to his chair and sat down, and then asked, Okay, now that you don't have to worry about death, do you want to come, or do you just want me to handle it? It was at this point the sting faded, but then I felt something spreading out from it and moving throughout my body. I panicked more inside my head. Oh my God, what did he just do to me? No sooner had I thought it than he answered. Advanced nanobots. Puzzled at this, I had heard of such things in games I would play, but never any real-world use. Nothing I had seen done with them could stop a person from dying. I started to ask, how does this keep me from dying? When I looked up and found myself looking down the barrel of a large caliber handgun, then I heard him say, Here, let me show you. Then there was a bright flash and a loud bang. Then nothing. I was floating in a sea of nothing. But then my ears started ringing, and my head was splitting worse than anything I had ever felt. I opened my eyes. My vision was still a bit blurry, but after a few moments had passed, my sight came into focus to see him sitting in his chair, drinking from his glass. Then he asked me, So, how does it feel having your melon splattered all over the place? I held my head, still throbbing and pounding. It hurt like hell. My head hurt so much. I snickered, and then said, Well, a nasty headache is not bad. I mean, most people don't come back from that. And then it hit me. I just died. And like always, he had responded to my every thought. Oh, don't worry, it was only for a few moments. But I had to do that to show you something. I angrily replied, That a bullet to the brain really hurts? Thanks, got that. He just laughed and then replied, "Close, but not quite. What I meant to show you was that while those nanobots will put you back together from next to nothing, you're still going to have to experience the pain, so don't go off trying to be a hero." He paused for a moment, and a wide smile grew across his face. "That's my job." I got up from the floor, sat back in my chair holding my head, still hurting so much. But then I spoke. "Okay, just so I make sure I understand you correctly. You're going to save my dad and take me with you." He just simply nodded at this. I continued, "And you filled me with nanobots because I'm so squishy, right?" Again he nodded. I took in a deep breath, my headache starting to free up. "And you're going to stop the Demon Lord." He laughed. "I eat things like those for breakfast. But it might just be quite fun getting to it." I took in a deep breath, my head now fine, and then I asked, "So when do we leave?" He seemed to think for a moment, then simply said, "Why wait? Let's go now." I stood up from my chair and asked, "So where do you keep your weapons room?" He let out a small chuckle. "All in good time, my dear boy, but first we must find your papa." He pulled something from inside his coat pocket and set it on the table. It looked like a normal cell phone. How wrong I was. The moment he spoke, I was shocked at what I saw. "Ada, find me the current location of Dr. Victor Cross." A 3D holographic woman was projected from his phone and began to speak. "Searching for Dr. Cross." It idled for a few. It was in this moment of silence I asked, "What is that?" He looked at me and said, "That is Ada. And if you want to know what she is, then ask her." Wait, what? I was very confused at this point, but with all of the odd things that had happened so far, I decided to stop questioning it and just do as I was advised. So I asked it, "Ada, what are you?" I asked the small holographic woman. She turned to me and said, "I am Ada, Mr. Holt's advanced digital assistant. I control everything at the central hub and relay and find data as it is requested by Mr. Holt. I am also in charge of shipping and receiving of weapons and other goods he may need at any moment." She stopped, and a light bulb appeared over her head. "Dr. Cross found." She then ran off an address. "That's down by the industrial docks. Why is he there, I wondered." He then smirked. "Where else would you hold someone if you didn't want them easily found?" I thought on this and said, "Yeah, true, but it's so cliché." He then replied, "Oh, I know. But hey, if something goes wrong, at least there won't be many people hurt." "True," was all I could manage to say. "Okay, now that we know where he is, what's the plan?" He looked at Ada and asked, "Ada, can you give me a scan on that building? An exact location of Dr. Cross." Her face went blank for a few moments. Then a 3D model of the building was projected in front of us. "Dr. Cross is being held on the 5th floor." "Okay, what else do we have in there?" he asked. "Thermal scans show a massive number of warm bodies on the 3rd floor. Approximately 12 heat signatures on that floor. On the ground floor, there appears to be approximately 24 normal heat signatures." He seemed to think for a moment, and then asked, "Anything else showing up on echo scans?" "Scanning." A few moments passed. "New targets identified. 30 humanoid objects moving on the 2nd floor." There's nothing on the last 2 floors, so that must be where the fun is. A slightly menacing smile grew across his face as he said this. "Well, are you ready to go, kid?" He looked at me and asked. I blinked a few times. What about equipment?" He laughed and said, "Oh, don't worry about that." He got up from his chair and pushed something on the fireplace. As it slid to one side, revealing a hidden broom with two poles leading down, I looked at him, puzzled, as he walked over to one and said to me, "Come on, we have to get going." I walked over to the other pole and asked, "Where do these go?" He shook his head and jeered at me. "To the garages. Where else?" Still puzzled, I asked, "But why the poles?" But before I could finish, he had started it down, so I had no choice but to follow.